Week 7 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I looked at off the wire this week. The first one, the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers coming off a bye week, but their defense has been pretty solid for the most part, this Green Bay Packer team. So now to get a few plays back off the bye, and they got a great matchup at the Broncos that we know they turn the ball over a lot, and they just can't move the football as well. We saw versus the Kansas City Chiefs in last week's game. So right now, this Packer team, I know over the last few weeks, they've had a lot of injuries. The numbers haven't looked good, but this week they could go out there and make plays. So as a streaming option right now, they're definitely a team out there in tons of fantasy leagues at 83%. So if you need the DST defense, the Packers are in there this week. The next DST is the Los Angeles Rams. So this Ram team starting to get confidence ever since Cooper Kupp coming back. I know they had a tough loss to Philly a few weeks ago, but they bounced back in a big way with the Cardinals in that Week 6 game. 9 points allowed, 2 sacks, an interception, and a fumble recovery. So right now, good matchup coming up, and they're available in tons of leagues here at 87%. It's another great streaming option versus a mediocre to poor Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I know George Pickens has been solid this season. Jalen Warren obviously has looked well. It looks like Deontay Johnson will be back in the lineup, which always helps. But this Ram team still could get to the quarterback. Aaron Donald, I know he isn't as dominant as he once was, but he's still a dominant force on the defensive line, getting to the quarterback, making plays. And this Ram team, like I said, offensively, they've got everything going. And now this defense is trying to piece things together. So right now, with a pretty decent matchup versus a mid to poor offense, I like the Rams as a streaming option this week. The next DST is the Vegas Raiders. So the Raiders came off a good ball game versus the New England Patriots. And we know this Patriot team's one of the worst offenses, if not in the league. So Vegas right now out there, the Raiders in 53% of fantasy leagues. So the last few games for them, they've been serviceable. Week 5 versus Green Bay, 13 points allowed, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions. And Week 6 versus the Pats, only 17 points allowed, 4 sacks, an into, and a safety. So Week 7 at the Chicago Bears, a game with Justin Fields, we might not see him in that game after hurting his thumb on his throwing hand. I don't know if he's going to play in the game or not, but that's obviously not a good thing to grip the football. So right now might be a long day once again for the Chicago Bear offense. And we saw it at the end of that game with Tyson Bagnet coming in and not really doing much, finishing the game 83 yards, an interception, a touchdown rushing, and a fumble loss. So right now, either him or Nathan Peterman will be the quarterback if Justin Fields can't play. But either way, this team's given up the 5th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And I think this week here, the Raiders once again could be a decent option. Next DST is the Cleveland Browns. So this Brown team, they've been a pretty dominant unit for the most part this season. And we just saw them shut down one of the better offenses in the league, even though McCaffrey got hurt. And obviously, as well, Deebo Samuel left the game early. But they shut him down in terms of points on the scoreboard. 17 points allowed to the Niners, 3 sacks and into. So this week here, good matchup at the Indianapolis Colts. Gardner Minshew, we just saw him turn the football over a bunch of times. That offense isn't really consistent, even though Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, a pretty good 1-2 combo. But right now, this team going indoors could play even faster with Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, and Zadarius Smith as their top defensive players. So right now, this Brown team, I know they're not getting a lot of turnovers and putting up huge fantasy points, but they're only holding teams down mid-teens, low 20s. So right now, I like the Browns as an ad this week, and they're available right now in 83% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final defense DST unit I looked at off the wire this week is the Washington Commanders. So the Commanders, they were a streaming option a little bit once again in the Week 6 at the Falcons. They didn't disappoint. 16 points allowed, 3 sacks, 3 intos in that one. And this week here, they got a matchup at the Giants. I give up the most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So right here, this Washington Commander team, I know they got some players on the D-line. Secondary isn't all that great in the back end, but they could get to the quarterback. And they made Desmond Ridder, even though I know Ridder's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, look pretty bad in that one and throw 3 interceptions. So right now, the Commander DST out there in tons of fantasy leagues, they got dropped a lot. A lot of people didn't believe in them in Week 6, but right now they're out there in tons of leagues in 69%. So if you need a streaming option this week, I like them at the Giants. So that's a few defense DST units I looked at here off the wire in Week 7 of the fantasy football season.